Alright lads, so this is the revision video on Unit 4, Reducing Risk. Hopefully you find some of it useful. We're going to talk a little about what hazard and risk and what they are. So a hazard is something with the potential to cause harm, that's a hazard. And risk is to do with the likelihood of harm occurring. So that's the first thing you need to know. And you need to have an idea of different key documentation needed in terms of recording risks and things like that and reducing risk. So maintenance logs, accident log, those things are gonna reduce risk because you can look at patterns and trends, and you can train staff with some of the information that you look at. So yeah, it's the documentation. First aid logs as well. Going to allow you to look at the first aid treatments that are given, and also that can be used for legal reasons, but to also train staff with. So there's a couple of documents, right? So when we talk about hazards, we need to think about splitting them into the key different areas, and I put when we talk about hazards, so let's start with hazards, right, and being aware of hazards. So hazards, something with the potential to cause harm, and the spec is split it into four different key areas. So environmental, in fact I'll just put the full title. So environmental, then you've got psychological, okay, so psychological hazards. Then we've got chemical, I hope you know, that's a chemical, and then you've got your biological, so biological hazards, okay. So they're the different hazards there, like they're different titles, and it might ask you for two different types, okay. So two different types of hazards, and you do a risk assessment. A risk assessment is an official document. A risk assessment is a requirement under HSE that you risk assess your workplace, but the risk assessment will allow you to identify hazards, and we'll look at that in a minute, but identify these things and then also mention the control measures. So that's the point of a risk assessment. It's to identify hazards and then come up with control measures to minimise the risk and reduce the risk. Okay, so if I was to say to you about an environmental hazard, really what you've got to be thinking of is, you might think of natural hazards or weather. So we're looking at a weather-related one, icy pitch. You're looking at faulty equipment as another one. I once did a vaulting lesson, and didn't secure the vault, and it was a hazard. I hadn't sorted the equipment properly. So, a student nearly injured themselves. Didn't, but nearly did. You could have issues with clothing or jewellery. So they could be, jewellery, hair, clothing, anything like that. So clothing or jewellery. It could be a type of environmental hazard. So jewellery there, the participants were doing that. And then you've got basic slip and trip. So these are common. So slip, trip. You might have heard Paul Rooney saying slip, trip or fall. He's on about call Paul, the accident lawyer. Well, he's looking at environmental hazards such as wet floors, so in changing rooms, wet floors, and just be mindful of what things might cause these slip and trip. Equipment left out, boxes left in the foyers of reception. Think outside the box, but this is a good one for environmental. The weather's another one. So they're the key ones for that. Let's power through quickly. So then we're going to look at psychological. Really, the spec really just wants you to know that the main ones are going to be stress. You could have staff with depression or clients who turn up, but mental health related. Usually that it's interested in knowing about fatigue, drug or alcohol use. So say any of those things, which is a hazard, because if you're operating a machinery under the influence, or with drugs, or with stress or depression, you're not thinking straight. So a control measure for that one is harder, but occupational health, I don't think they'd expect you to know that, but you might have time off work or go to see a doctor, or be referred for a doctor as a control measure if they ever ask that question. So occupational health, not everyone even has that department for that, but it's a department that deals with these two things. or a doctor. You might get a referral to the doctors. Again, unlikely to ask about that control measure, but you never know, so I'll put it in. Right, so next one then, we've got a chemical. Chemical, really, I think most of you know it, but you're just thinking of cleaning products as one example. So cleaning products could be your example of a type of chemical hazard. You could also look at chlorine in the pool as another one, and then it might ask you even what PPE is included in that. Hopefully you're going to talk about gloves or masks in order to manage chemicals and lock them away securely. That's another control measure. Make sure you monitor who uses them. So they're the control measures for them. All right, so biological then. In the biological, I'm just going to whiz through because I think most of you know this. So let's go to biological. So biological, key ones there we're looking at are going to be litter. So I went into a class only today, and it was like a really scruffy banana. Banana peels and things like that are, biological waste and actually can be a hazard. So that would be one example. Infection. So infection. People not washing their hands. So infection could be another biological hazard. Not related to this. But like if you're in a hotel, there's been cases in hotels where it gets spread and people have to wash their hands a lot to stop the spread. On a cruise ship it's the same, but in leisure centres or hospitals, they normally have sanitisers or hand washers to keep and reduce that as a measure, or signs up to say please wash your hands after use, to try and stop that, to stop bacteria and cross-contamination, client to client, or even the first aider putting on gloves, things like that. Okay, another one is dog waste on the pitch. So you might also see, and this was an issue in play football actually, where you had dog feces. So dog feces or animal waste, if you're struggling, providing bins and bags or fences are going to be a control measure for that. So there's three biological, and they're a different family, if you like, of different hazards. Okay, so that's explained. I'm just going to then knock that off. Have a little look at that. Make sure you made all your notes. Okay, good. So then, if I take them off and try and know at least two, I would say two. Historically, it's 1 to 2 out of each bracket in the exams. So try and focus on 2 for each one. Right. Okay. So cleaning products or chlorine, as I say. Right. Okay. So. And I talked about that being a formal document that needs to be done. Right, chemical. Right, all right then. So then I'm going to just highlight the. So if we carry on with this, and we look at next part is controls, and they split the controls. I talked about different controls, talked about signs and things like that. But basically, it wants you to know the name of a couple of different key controls. So the first one, in terms of control measures, are the ways to sort of keep things safe. And we'll talk about like the general ways. I'm going to come back to these general ways. So like it might just ask for generally out of ways to minimise risk. So general ways to minimise, right? And you'll see in the exam this minimise risk. And if it's just general, it wants the logical general things like a risk assessment. Is a risk assessment going to minimise risk? Absolutely, because you're identifying hazards and stuff like that. Right, so a risk assessment is training staff. So, for example, manual handling. So, training staff on manual handling, or EOPs, having EOPs in place, emergency operating procedures. It's going to minimise the risk. They're going to know what to do if there's an emergency. Okay, so health and safety signs, one of the most common control measure. Cheap, easy to sort, and most people can see them. It's going to minimise the risk. Okay, PPE for certain jobs. Providing PPE is another way of minimising risk. All right, so you're going to make sure if there is hazards, they're dealt with quickly. Deal with hazards quickly. So if there is a hazard, with hazards, so i.e. broken sink or something like that, quickly get a mark for that. So don't leave it like play football did, tackle it quickly, so that it's repaired. Customer feedback. Listen to customer feedback. If there's glass on the pitch, go out there and make sure that you deal with it, so that it's not, no one can injure themselves on it. So again, take for customer feedback and also have policies up to date. Policies are gonna so the policies are gonna, and there's 8 marks there. The policies are gonna make sure that and it's these policies that you use to train staff. So when staff come in, you're saying, right, okay, if there's an emergency, you go out this fire exit, you make sure you evacuate your areas if you're in the gym, you make sure you help and assist special populations down the stairs, and you talk through the staff and you explain their commitments in terms of the EOPs. That's written in a policy so that you're covered. Okay. Same with first aid. You make sure you've got first aiders as part of the first aid requirement stuff, but that's a different topic. So they're the general, right? All the general, if you can remember, the general ways to minimise risk. And then when we're talking about these, control measures, right? It's split into visual, which is pretty obvious. Physical, we'll talk on that in a minute. We've got procedural, okay, and I hope what procedural means. So procedural, and the last one is auditory, okay. So the auditory one as well. So they're the 4 different control measures, and it might ask you to know a little bit about it, right? So what are they then? Visual, looking back to this, signs. Okay, signs are an obvious one and the most used one, signs and posters. They're there and you can see it. So slippery surface, cleaning in progress, all the rest of it. Signs are going to be your common one. Okay, you might also have lights that you use in fire exit signs. So you might have lights, which is a visual, linked with signs as well, like the emergency exit signs running off a different system to the other electrics, right? Okay, visual one example there, right? Okay, so physical control measure, again, fences. So fences are going to be a physical one to stop people, getting in out the building, and you could have locked, units or locked storage, or lockers even, for keeping chemicals safe and keeping everything away, or even PPE. All right, so PPE are gonna help with that side. So fences and locked units for chemicals, as we touched on before. Auditory, okay, so you're gonna have alarms, okay, if there's a fire, and you could have a PA system. They're examples. Oh yeah, let go of the pen then. So they're examples of this. So two there. Okay, so getting to this one then, procedures. You're gonna have, although the alarms are gonna work, procedures will be drills. So you could do first aid training in the pool. Tim said they do it every 2 weeks. First aid training would be example of getting, jumping into the pool, making sure they get, they know how to get people out of submerged in the pool up to the top and out as quick as they can, so they practice it and they know what the responsibilities are. Fire drills is another one. So fire drill, practicing fire drills. It's going to be one. Moving lifeguards. So lifeguards around the pool, they change chairs. They might be there, then they go to this chair, then they might go to this chair. So they've got different view, just so they're focused, and it's not as monotonous and boring. So they're the different control measures that are covered there. So far we've covered control measures, we've covered general ways to minimise risk, just general ways a manager, if it asks, or a health and safety officer can minimise the risk. Now the health and safety officer will do some of these things, risk assess, do site inspections, train staff on health and safety issues, manual handling, keep policies up to date. So you can tick a lot of these, keep health and safety policies up to date, deal with things quickly, that'll be them. Make sure they review the PPE, make sure they've got signs up, make sure they train staff, make sure they do risk assessing. The health and safety officer will do some of these things, okay, as part of their role. And we've covered different hazards and also the different control measures. Right, okay, last part then. I'm going to flip off this bit. And I just want you to know, hopefully this being useful, I want you to know, lastly, the 5 steps. Okay, so look, if you see the 5 steps of a risk assessment, there's 5 key steps, and this video hopefully will help you explain it. So let's click across. Okay, so first one I missed there is identify the hazards. So that was the first one, the first step. I think I started the video a bit early. So the first step was identify the hazards. Step 2 is who might be harmed and how. Okay, these are some of the things. Okay, so as the health and safety officer does an inspection around the building, it's got to be reasonably practical. Obviously, you've got to be able to afford putting the control measures in place. That's the first thing, based upon the amount of the potential risk of it. But then once you've gone around and you're doing your site inspection, you record the findings, like as we did, we score them, the different things, and then we implement controls. We say what we're going to do to fix them or minimise the risk. Okay, so that's a little bit on that. Hopefully it's been helpful. And we've covered the 5 steps. So just to recap, it's identify the risk factors or identify the hazards, who can be harmed and how, evaluate the risk, record your findings, and monitor and review your findings. So annually or whenever you do risk assessment. That's it. They're the 5 steps. I hope it's been useful. Cheers.